Once in a small, close-knit village, Ugoma lived peacefully with her husband and 3 children. Her family meant everything to her, and she took joy in the simple moments. Her son climbing trees to bring down fresh palm nuts, her daughters learning to weave baskets by her side. But all of that changed one fateful season when her husband passed away unexpectedly, leaving Ugoma alone with their 2 daughters and their young son, Ndube. With her husband gone, life grew harder with each passing day. In their village, the absence of a husband brought deep challenges for a widow like Ugoma. She begged her neighbors for food as they lived hand to mouth, but she began to see pity in their eyes, and sometimes even averted glances. The shame and helplessness weighed heavily on her heart. Determined to give her children a better life, she decided to leave their village for a new land, hoping for a fresh start and a chance to rebuild. The journey was long, and Ugoma's heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope as they reached the strange land. But survival there was just as harsh, if not harsher, than it was in their own village. Ndube, though only a boy, felt responsible for his family's welfare. He would climb tall palm trees, cutting palm nuts to help feed them. One sunny afternoon, while Ugoma was weaving and the girls were gathering firewood, Ndube fell from a tree, hitting the ground with a devastating thud. Ugoma ran to him, but it was too late. She held her boy close, her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces, each shard sharper than the last. The days after Ndube's death were a blur of tears and sorrow. Ades and Orlando tried to be strong, clinging to their mother in moments of grief and fear. They watched their mother with worried eyes. But the same fierce love that drove Ugoma to leave home held her together, even as her heart crumbled. Yet, as the seasons passed, their struggles only intensified. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, and work was scarce. Then came the great famine in the land. Food became nearly impossible to find, and the small village where they had taken refuge was paralyzed with starvation. People became desperate, but Ugoma had one final choice to make: either to watch her children die of hunger in a foreign land, or to return to her original village and face the unknown. With weary hearts, Ugoma, Adaeze, and Orlando began their journey back, each step heavier than the last. They carried with them memories of Ndube, of their trials, and of the life they had fought to sustain. When they finally arrived in their old village, neighbors who once knew them looked upon Ugoma with a mixture of compassion and surprise. Though broken and weathered, Ugoma held her daughter's hands tightly, resolved to give them what little she could, to rebuild from the ashes of sorrow and struggle. As they settled back into their familiar surroundings, Ugoma found strength in her daughters. The village elders, moved by her resilience, offered her some farmland to tend and a small home to live in. Life was still difficult, but they began to plant seeds, hoping they'd grow in time. The village children gathered around, and Orlando, who told stories of their journey, of Ndube's bravery, and of a mother who refused to let them fall into despair. In the end, though grief had marked her life, Ugoma's return brought her the comfort of familiar faces and a community that had once been her own. And in their humble home, Ugoma and her daughters found a flicker of hope, nurtured by the love they held for each other and the memories of the son and brother who watched over them from above. Ugoma believed that even though her son Ndube was dead, his spirit was always with her, and his memory was not the type she would forget in a hurry. As Ugoma and her daughters entered the village, news of their return spread quickly, rippling through the quiet community like a wildfire. The villagers who remembered her gathered along the dirt paths to catch a glimpse of the widow who had once left in despair. As they drew closer to their old home, Ugoma's eyes filled with tears, seeing the house she had once shared with her husband. Now, it stood in disrepair, walls cracked, and the yard overgrown with thick bushes. But before she could even take a step forward, familiar faces appeared from all sides, encircling her family with warmth and compassion. Old friends and neighbors approached Ugoma with tear-filled eyes and gentle words, wrapping her in heartfelt embraces. Ugoma, Onyema, one of the elderly women murmured, her voice quivering. We are so sorry for all you have endured. We heard about your loss, your son. She placed a comforting hand on Ugoma's shoulder, and as if a floodgate had opened, Ugoma let her tears flow freely. Women from the village clutched her hands, their sorrow mingling with hers as they shared stories of children they had lost, of the pain of a mother's heart, and the strength they drew from each other. The village head, a wise man known for his compassion and fairness, soon arrived. His eyes softened with understanding as he gazed at the small family standing weary and worn before him. He raised his hand, calling for quiet, and then spoke in a gentle but commanding tone. We welcome Ugoma and her daughters back among us as our family. We cannot erase the hardships she has faced, but we can stand with her, as we have always stood together. Moved by his words, he ordered a group of villagers to gather tools, materials, and food for Ugoma and her daughters. The villagers, young and old, quickly answered the call. Some brought food baskets filled with yams, cocoyams, and vegetables, ensuring that the family would not go hungry that night or in the days to come. Others brought blankets and clothing to replace the worn items they had brought back with them. The next day, a group of young men and women arrived at Ugoma's home, ready to repair and revive it. The men brought tools to rebuild the crumbling walls, mixing mud and stones as they fortified the foundation that had once felt so secure. With care and precision, they patched cracks, strengthened the roof, and repaired the doors. Meanwhile, the women began clearing the overgrown bushes surrounding the compound, some of them humming songs of homecoming and strength. Adais and Orlando watched in awe as the villagers worked tirelessly, their hearts swelling with gratitude and relief. One of the young women took Orlando's hand and showed her how to sweep the compound in wide circular motions, laughing as Orlando shyly followed her movements. Asabo, older and more reserved, found herself standing beside the elderly woman, who gently placed a woven cloth around her shoulders, whispering as she faced Orlando. You have your mother's strength, child. Wear this proudly and know we are here for you. Ugoma stood back, watching the transformation of her home and feeling the deep, shared love of her community wrap around her like a comforting blanket. She realized that though life had been brutal, she was not alone. In this place of familiar soil and familiar faces, they were rebuilding not only her home, but the hope she thought she had lost. When the last stone was laid and Ugoma's entire compound was finally cleared, the village head returned, offering a blessing upon the home. Ugoma, he said, placing his hand gently on her head. May you and your daughters find peace and healing here, and may the memory of your son be forever honored among us. The crowd nodded, their faces somber and kind. As a young boy, Obi brought forward a small handmade sculpture, a palm tree with 3 carved fruits, symbolizing the strength and spirit of her beloved son, Ndube. That night, for the first time in many years, Ugoma and her daughters slept in peace, surrounded by the comforting sounds of their village. As she drifted into sleep, she knew that although she had faced unimaginable hardship, they had returned to a place where they would never be abandoned. Their village had embraced them, easing their burdens and making sure they would never feel alone again. As dawn broke over her restored home, Ugoma felt something new. She felt a sense of belonging and strength, knowing that they could heal together. In the weeks that followed, Ugoma tried to settle back into life in her village, though nothing felt quite the same. Her home was now sturdy and her daughters were safe, but life was a daily struggle. She had no farmland of her own and no resources beyond what her kind neighbors shared. Some days, Ugoma would weave baskets or do small tasks for other families to earn enough to buy a few cups of grain. But even so, the food was never enough to fill their bellies, and they often went to bed hungry. Each morning she would wake up before dawn, slipping out into the quiet, misty fields to search for wild greens or fallen fruits. Adais and Orlando sometimes helped her, though she tried to send them to school whenever possible, knowing that education was their best hope. They wore patched clothing and ate simple meals. And though they laughed together, Ugoma knew her daughters could feel the sadness and weariness she carried. And each night, as the stars rose in the sky, Ugoma would sit on a small bench outside her door, memories of her husband and son washing over her like waves crashing against rocks. Her husband had been her strength, her partner in all things, and without him, every responsibility now fell on her thin shoulders. Sometimes she could almost feel his hand on her shoulder, steadying her as he used to do. She remembered his voice telling her stories by the fire, his laughter filling their home, and the quiet strength with which he guided their family. Then there was Ndube, her only son, who had shouldered the role of protector even at such a young age. His memory haunted her more than words could capture. She could still see him, full of life and determination, climbing that palm tree, eager to help his mother in any way he could. Each time she thought of his fall, a wave of grief would grip her chest, and she would bury her face in her hands, choking back tears so her daughters wouldn't see. Ndube had given his life in service to her, to their family, and the pain of that loss felt like a wound that would never heal. There were days when Ugoma felt so weary that she could hardly move, her heart weighed down by a sorrow so deep it felt like it would swallow her whole. When neighbors asked her to join village gatherings or market days, she would often decline, feeling that her sorrow and struggles separated her from the rest. In her heart, she believed that others couldn't understand the depth of her pain, the way it clung to her like a shadow. But her daughters saw her struggles, even if she tried to hide them. Adais, her eldest, would sometimes sit beside her at night, reaching for her mother's hand in silent comfort. Orlando would bring wildflowers to her mother, weaving them into small garlands and placing them around Ugoma's neck. Though the girls didn't know how to soothe the ache in their mother's heart, they tried, each in their own way, to remind her of the love and life they still shared. As time passed, Ugoma began to realize that though her heart still ached, she could not allow grief to consume her completely. She had 2 daughters who needed her love, her strength, and her guidance. They, too, had suffered losses, and she saw in their faces a quiet resilience that mirrored her own. Though they continued to live from hand to mouth, scraping by however they could, Ugoma found herself slowly accepting the help her neighbors offered. She began to see herself not as a burden, but as part of a community that wanted her to survive, that wanted her and her daughters to find some semblance of peace. With renewed resolve, Ugoma threw herself into whatever work she could find, saving small coins when she could, and learning to lean on others without shame. There were still many nights when she cried softly, missing her husband and son, longing for the life she had once known. But she began to feel a glimmer of hope, a belief that her daughters could have a future, even if her own heart bore scars too deep to fully heal. In their laughter, in the gentle pressure of their hands in hers, Ugoma found the strength to keep moving forward, to keep fighting, and to keep loving fiercely, even in the face of sorrow. And in that small but steady determination, Ugoma found a way to honor the memories of her beloved husband and son, by living, by loving, and by building a life for her daughters, even from the ashes of grief. In the warm glow of dusk, Ugoma and her daughters sat outside their small home, resting after another long day. Adaize, who sat on the wooden bench, her hands rough and calloused from the fields, looked at her mother, determination glimmering in her eyes. "Mama," she began, her voice gentle but firm, "I know you worry about us working, but we are strong just like you taught us. Orlando and I will continue no matter how hard it gets. We promise to wipe away your tears and we mean it. Ugoma sighed, her eyes filled with a mixture of pride and concern. My daughter, you and Orlando are still young. Your father and I wanted so much more for you. Schooling, a life without this kind of hardship. Mama, Orlando interrupted, scooting closer. We don't mind. We're learning from every job we do, from every person we help. We're learning resilience, just like you. And besides, she glanced at Adaze with a smile. Together we'll be just fine. Ugoma reached out, holding her daughter's hands tightly. You two are already stronger than I could have ever dreamed. But you must promise me that if things become too difficult, you'll tell me. We'll face it together. You don't have to bear this burden alone. Adaze nodded earnestly. Mama, we are a team. We've learned that strength doesn't come from just one person, but from the love we share. And when I'm working in the fields, I think of Papa and Ndube watching over us. It gives me courage. A silence fell over them, each one lost in thoughts of their loved ones. Ugoma finally broke it, her voice a whisper. You both have grown so much, she said, tears welling up. And sometimes it breaks my heart to see how much you've taken on. I wish I could have given you a life without all this suffering. Orlando hugged her mother tightly. But Mama, you've given us something far more valuable, she said softly. You've shown us what it means to love, to never give up. That is worth more than any easy life. A small, hopeful smile tugged at Ugoma's lips. You girls, I couldn't be more proud, but remember not to lose yourselves in all of this work. Life is more than just surviving. You deserve happiness too. Adaze grinned, a sparkle of mischief in her eyes. Oh, don't worry, Mama. We may work hard, but we laugh hard too. You should see Orlando in the fields. She's always singing, making everyone to laugh. Orlando blushed, nudging. Well, someone has to keep things lively, right? She turned to her mother, a soft smile on her face. And Mama, your smile is the only reward we want. Seeing you happy makes all of it worth it. Touched by their words, Ugoma leaned her head on Adaze's shoulder, feeling a rare warmth flood her heart. For the first time in a long while, she felt the heaviness of grief lift, replaced by the undeniable strength of her daughter's love. Thank you, my precious daughters, she whispered, for teaching me how to hope again. With you by my side, I believe we can face anything. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the love of her daughters, Ugoma realized that, despite everything, they had already found something precious, a family bond that could withstand even the greatest trials. And with renewed strength, they sat together under the stars, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. The next morning, as the sun cast its golden rays across the village, Adaze and Orlando prepared to leave for another day's work. They had heard that a neighboring family needed help tending their crops and had agreed to lend their hands in exchange for a small payment of yams and cassava. As they gathered their tools, Ugoma watched them, her heart swelling with pride but also with an ache that only a mother could know. Be careful, my daughters, she said, pressing her hand over her chest as if to steady her heart. Remember, if the work becomes too much, you don't have to continue. We'll find a way. She smiled reassuringly, resting a gentle hand on her mother's arm. Don't worry, Mama, we're strong, and one day we'll make things easier for you. That is our promise. Orlando, always the livelier of the two, grinned and gave her mother a playful wink. Yes, Mama. Besides, we have you to come home to. That alone makes the work worth it. With that, the sisters set off down the path, waving as they went. Ugoma watched them until they disappeared around the bend, her heart both heavy and full, marveling at their resilience. As the hours passed, she tried to busy herself, sweeping the yard, gathering firewood, and patching up small holes in the roof, but her mind kept wandering back to her daughters and the promise they had made to her. Later that evening, as the sky softened into dusk and Orlando returned, their faces smudged with dirt, but their eyes bright, they carried bundles of yams, cassava, and a few ripe plantains, a bounty they had earned through hours of hard labor. "Mama, look!" Orlando called excitedly, dropping her bundle at her mother's feet. "We've brought back enough to last us for days." Ugoma's eyes filled with tears of gratitude and pride as she examined the bundles of food. She reached out, cupping each daughter's face in her hands, her voice trembling. "My brave girls, you've brought more than just food. You've brought hope into this home." Orlando's gaze softened and she took her mother's hand, squeezing it gently. "Mama, you've given us everything. This is our way of giving back to you." Over the following weeks, the girls continued working in the fields and helping villagers wherever they could. With every bit of food they earned and every small coin they saved, they brought a new light into their mother's life. They would return each evening, weary but fulfilled, knowing they were building a better future one day at a time. One evening, after a particularly long day, Ugoma sat with her daughters around a small fire, boiling a pot of soup with vegetables and a bit of dried fish, another reward from a day's hard work. As they shared the meal, their laughter echoed through the night, a sound that was becoming more and more familiar to their home. "Mama," Adeyezi said between bites, "I heard that the village head's wife needs help with her weaving business. If Orlando and I work with her, she said she would teach us the craft and maybe even pay us a little more." Ugoma's eyes brightened with pride. "That would be wonderful, my daughter. Learning a skill will give you something that no one can take away from you. And who knows? Maybe one day you will start your own business." Orlando, excited by the idea, leaned closer. "Yes, Mama. Imagine, we could weave cloths and baskets. We'd have more to offer and maybe even earn enough to buy more land for farming." Ugoma laughed softly, marveling at the determination in her daughter's eyes. "You both dream so big, and that is beautiful. Your father would have been so proud to see his daughters planning a future with such strength and courage." The fire crackled as the three of them sat in contentment, savoring the meal and each other's company. As they finished, Orlando leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, her voice soft. "Mama, no matter how much we work, we'll always come home to you. You're our strength and we'll never stop working to bring you happiness." Ugoma felt tears welling up, but this time they were not only tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude, of love, and of a deep, unbreakable bond that would carry them through whatever trials lay ahead. "My daughters," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "you have already given me happiness. You have given me reason to hope, to dream. No mother could ask for more." In the weeks that followed, Adeyezi and Orlando's reputation spread throughout the village. More families began to offer them work, admiring the dedication and strength that had been shaped by love and hardship. They learned weaving, tending to animals, even some simple trade skills from the village merchants. Little by little, they brought more stability into their lives, and slowly hope and joy began to bloom in their hearts like flowers after a long, barren season. Each evening they returned to Ugoma with stories of what they had learned, filling her heart with pride and comfort. And though life remained challenging, Ugoma felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that her daughters were her legacy, carrying forward the love, resilience, and dreams of the family they had lost. Together they had become stronger than the hardships they faced, bound by a love so fierce that it could withstand anything. And as they sat together in the soft glow of evening, they knew that, no matter what the future held, they would always have each other. The following planting season, Orlando took on a new job working at the farm of one of the wealthiest men in the village, Chief Akumba. His fields stretched farther than the eye could see, and his crops grew lush and plentiful, tended by many hands. Orlando's reputation as a hard-working and honest girl had spread, and she was grateful for the chance to work there, knowing it would help her family even more. Each day she rose before dawn and walked to the farm, often the first to arrive and the last to leave. She took pride in her work, planting, weeding, and harvesting with care, always ensuring that she did her tasks well. As the weeks passed, her dedication didn't go unnoticed. The chief's son, Chibu, would often watch her as he walked the fields, impressed by her diligence and honesty. He noticed how she would pick even the smallest weeds, how she stayed late to finish her work, and how she treated everyone with kindness and respect. One warm afternoon, as Orlando worked under the sun, she heard footsteps approaching and looked up to see Chibu standing nearby. She straightened up, brushing her hands on her dress, surprised to see him there. "Good afternoon, Orlando," he greeted her with a warm smile, his voice gentle. "Good afternoon, sir," she replied, bowing her head respectfully. She was aware of who he was, and felt slightly shy speaking to the chief's son. Chibu chuckled, sensing her discomfort. "Please, there's no need to be so formal. You work here as hard as anyone, if not harder. I'd like you to feel at ease around me." Orlando nodded, smiling a little, though she kept her eyes down, focusing on her work. "Thank you, Chibu," she replied, hesitating over his name, as she was not accustomed to addressing him so informally. For the next few days, Chibu would often stop by to speak with her, asking her about her work, her family, and her life. Orlando, though shy at first, soon grew comfortable with his presence, finding him kind and down to earth. She shared stories about her mother and sister, about the struggles they had faced, and the small triumphs they celebrated together. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the fields, Chibu watched her intently, a thoughtful look in his eyes. "Orlando," he began, "I've seen many people work here, but I've never seen anyone as dedicated as you. You're honest and hard-working, and you don't give up, no matter how difficult the tasks are. Where does this strength come from?" Orlando paused, looking down at the soil between her hands. "I think it comes from love," she said softly, glancing up at him. "My mother has given everything for my sister and me. She's been through so much, but she never stops caring for us. I work hard because I want to ease her burdens, to show her that her sacrifices were not in vain." Chibu nodded, admiration shining in his eyes. "Your mother is fortunate to have a daughter like you, and I am fortunate to know you." He hesitated and then continued, "You inspire me, Orlando. You remind me of what truly matters." Orlando looked at him, her heart racing slightly. She hadn't expected his words, and for a moment she felt a warmth spread through her, a feeling she couldn't quite name. Over the following weeks their conversations became more frequent, and Orlando began to look forward to their moments together. They shared laughter, stories, and even dreams. Chibu would ask her about her hopes for the future, and she would blush, telling him of her desire to support her family, to build a life where her mother could finally rest and her sister could grow without worry. As their bond deepened, Chibu found himself captivated by her strength, her resilience, and her unyielding kindness. He admired how, despite her struggles, she remained gentle-hearted and honest, never asking for more than she was given, never taking shortcuts. One evening, as the sky turned a soft shade of purple, and they walked together toward the edge of the farm. He gathered the courage to speak his heart. "Orlando," he began, his voice low, "I never thought I would meet someone like you. You're unlike anyone I've known. Strong, selfless, and true. You have become important to me, more than you may realize." Orlando stopped, her heart pounding as she looked up at him, uncertainty in her eyes. "Chibu, what do you mean?" He took a deep breath, looking into her eyes. "I've come to care for you, Orlando. I admire everything about you, and I want to be part of your life, to stand beside you through every hardship and every joy. I know my feelings may come as a surprise, but they are true." Orlando felt a mixture of emotions: surprise, disbelief, and a growing warmth she couldn't ignore. She had never imagined that the chief's son would see her in such a way, nor that he would care for her, someone of humble means. She looked down shyly, her voice barely a whisper. "Chibu, I don't know what to say. My life has always been about my family, about helping my mother and sister. I never thought of myself as someone worthy of your affection." Chibu reached for her hand, his touch gentle and reassuring. "Orlando, your worth is not determined by wealth or status. You are remarkable because of who you are inside. I see a future with you, a future where we build something strong, where we face life's trials together. If you'll allow me, I'd like to stand beside you, to help make your dreams come true." Orlando's heart softened and she looked up at him, finding comfort in his gaze. She realized then that her heart had been growing fond of him too, drawn to his kindness, his sincerity, and his unwavering respect for her. With a shy smile she nodded. "Chibu, if you are willing to be part of my life, then I would be honored to be part of yours. Together, maybe we can build the life I've always dreamed of, for my family and for us." Chibu's face lit up with happiness, and he gently pulled her into an embrace, whispering, "Then we shall, Orlando. Together we will face everything life brings." In that quiet moment, with the setting sun casting golden hues across the fields, Orlando felt a new hope bloom in her heart. Her life, once marked by hardship and sorrow, had taken a new path, a path she would now walk with Chibu side by side, with love, resilience, and the promise of a brighter future. Chibu's feelings for Orlando continued to deepen, and he soon decided he could not imagine his life without her. He wanted her to be his wife, to share in his family's joys and bear witness to their lives. One day, with a heart full of hope, he approached his father, Chief Akumba, to announce his intentions. "Father," he began, standing respectfully before the chief, "I wish to marry Orlando, the daughter of Ugoma." Chief Akumba looked up, his expression darkening. "Orlando? The poor girl who works in our fields?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Yes, father," Chibu replied confidently. "She is honest, hard-working, and kind. I have come to love her deeply and believe she would make a wonderful wife." But Chief Akumba shook his head. "Chibu, this is not suitable. You are the son of a chief. You have a future to uphold. How will it look if you marry a girl from a poor family?" Chibu held his ground, his voice calm yet firm. "Father, I respect our family status, but I cannot choose a wife based on wealth alone. Orlando's strength and character are worth more than riches. She has shown me what it means to truly love and care for others. I believe she will bring honor to our family." Chief Akumba's face softened slightly, but he was still hesitant. Chibu, you do not know the challenges that could come from this. Marrying someone of lower status may bring gossip, and I fear for how this could affect our family's reputation. Chibu looked at his father with unwavering conviction. Father, our family's honor is built on values, not on the opinions of others. Orlando embodies those values more than anyone I have met. Please give her a chance. I know she will prove herself worthy of our family. Despite his reservations, Chief Akumba couldn't ignore his son's determination. He decided to meet Orlando himself, if only to appease Chibu. So one evening he invited Ugoma and her daughters to his home. When Orlando arrived with her mother and Adaize, they were welcomed into Chief Akumba's grand home. Nervous but respectful, they greeted him and listened as he questioned Orlando about her life, her family, and her intentions with his son. Orlando spoke openly, her voice steady and sincere, explaining her desire to build a future where her family could live in dignity and peace. As the conversation continued, Chief Akumba began to see in her the very traits his son had spoken of: honesty, humility, and strength. He noticed the light of determination in her eyes, the same resilience that had helped her survive life's hardships. Slowly, his heart softened, and he began to see beyond her humble background to the goodness within her. At last, after a long pause, he looked at Chibu with a sigh. You have chosen wisely, my son. Orlando is indeed a woman of great character. I give you my blessing to marry her. Chibu's face lit up with joy, and he clasped Orlando's hand, sharing a look filled with love and gratitude. The news of their engagement quickly spread through the village, and soon the story of their love became the talk of the town. People marveled at how Chibu, the son of a chief, had chosen a simple, hard-working girl as his wife. They spoke of the chief's change of heart and how Orlando's pure character had won him over. The day of their wedding arrived with much celebration, drawing villagers from near and far. The event was grand, with colorful decorations and traditional music filling the air. Ugoma watched her daughter with tears of joy, hardly able to believe how far their family had come. Stood beside her, holding her hand as they looked on with pride. As the festivities continued, people came to congratulate Ugoma, praising her for raising daughters of strength and dignity. Some even spoke of how Orlando's story inspired them, showing that honor and worth were not bound by wealth but by the heart and spirit. After the wedding, Chibu and Orlando built a life filled with love and respect. And true to his promise, he helped her family rise from poverty. He ensured that Ugoma had her own small farm, where she could grow food and support herself comfortably. He also helped pursue skills in weaving and trading, providing her with opportunities that would secure her future. Ugoma's home was soon transformed. No longer the humble dwelling that had once stood on the edge of despair. With Chibu's support, they renovated the house, painted the walls, and planted flowers around the yard. Neighbors admired the transformation and often commented on how the family's fortunes had turned. In the months that followed, Chibu and Orlando's marriage brought joy not only to their family, but to the whole village. People spoke of them as an example of true love and resilience, and their story was told to inspire the younger generation. Children would often gather around the elders, listening to the tale of how Chibu had chosen love over status, and how Orlando's honesty and hard work had changed the course of her family's destiny. For Ugoma, life had truly come full circle. She had struggled and lost so much, yet through her daughters, she found hope and joy once more. Now, whenever she sat in the comfort of her home, Surrounded by the laughter of her family and the kindness of her new community, she felt a profound sense of peace. One evening, as she sat with her daughters and Chibu under the stars, she looked up at the night sky, whispering a quiet prayer of gratitude. "Thank you," she murmured, her heart full, "for every hardship that led us here, and for the love that has healed us all." And as the stars twinkled above, Ugoma knew that finally they had found a life not just of survival, but of love, hope, and unbreakable bonds, a life she had once only dreamed of.